All right, Advent of Go day 9. I haven't had enough time to do live streams for the last few days, but we've made it to day 9 so far. And today's problem looked fairly straightforward, so I thought I'd try and do a quick live stream about it. Let's take a look at it. Essentially, we're given rows of numbers, and we need to figure out what's the next number in that sequence. And you do that simply by looking at the differences between each number all the way until they come to 0, and then you extrapolate from there to get the next number. So fairly straightforward for part 1. I'm not entirely sure what they're going to do with the part 2 twist, but we're just going to solve the part 1 as is. Now, one thing I'm curious about is Crystal has this thing called a range. Search for Crystal API. There we go. This is what I'm looking for. All right, so it's got this thing called a range. Let's take a look at it. There is range. Right. And then you can actually give it a couple items at the start, and it will figure out what it needs for the rest, I think. Unless I'm mixing it up with another language I learned recently. But let's see if that's correct. Inclusive range and exclusive range, endless range, beginning inclusive, beginning exclusive. Let's see if we can find an example of giving it 2 of them. Let's see. Oh, you know what? I think I'm thinking of Raku. Raku range. Yeah, I think that's what I'm thinking of. We gotta find an example of one of these. Okay, interesting. Well, essentially what it would do is you would write something like 1, 3, ... 10. And then it would give you every other element from 1 to 10. Of course, 10 is not one of those numbers, so it stops before 10. Actually, in the language, I think it was Raku. But you actually, if you specified a number that wasn't in one of those numbers, then it would actually skip past it and just go on forever. So I think there was something like an operator, like something like that, where it says, well, around 10, just do the right thing, sort of thing. But I think that was Raku and not Crystal. So, all right, so we can't quite use Crystal here, or sorry, arrange here, just because I thought if we did that, maybe just give it a few numbers and let it figure out what the next number in the sequence is. But otherwise, it's not too difficult. So let's just get all of the numbers. What do they call this in the? They're calling these numbers histories. Okay, so we're going to say the data set is equal to input.split on new lines. Oh, actually, let me also download the input. Okay. Split a new line, and then for each one of those, we're going to map and take each one of those things and split it on, actually, because we're doing that, we can just do this dot split by space, because I think we just have spaces in between the numbers, right? Yeah, just spaces. easy enough. Split on space, and then map that to a integer. Cool. Okay. So there's our data set. Now we need to, for each one of those things, I'll just say part 1 equals begin, and we need to iterate over the data set. So dataset dot map, and this might end up being a reduce if I decide to do that, but we'll make it a map for now. So map do history Okay, so for each one in the history, we essentially do this thing where we find all the differences, see if it's 0. If not, find all the differences of that, and keep going until we get to zeros. So, we could use a while loop. We could use recursion. Let's just use a while loop. So we'll do a while. We'll say difference is equal to nil, I suppose, for now. Let's say while difference is equal to 0, or not equal to 0, rather. Can I say greater? No, it can't be. It's not necessarily greater because the difference could be negative, potentially. So equal to 0. We're going to do, now we have to keep track of the ranges as we go. So maybe this is a better suited for a recursive function. Let's give that a try. So we're going to do def rec, because I don't know what to call it yet. And the base case is going to say, well, let's take the input. Input. I don't know what input's going to be called either. But we're going to say find. Now here's the other thing. I think our data is nicely formatted such that if any of the numbers are 0, no, that's not true. You might have 1 0 in there. Right? One of the differences could be 0. Or all of them. So we have to wait until all of them are 0. So we'll just say if input dot, I wish there was a way to say like all that wasn't just Boolean. There's a function called all, but it only checks to see if all of the items are true. So what I have been doing is just saying input dot map, and then mapping that to a identity function, which there doesn't seem to be an identity function built into Crystal. And then saying all on that. No, wait, not x, sorry. Not an identity function. Equals 0. There we go. So if that's the case, then we just want to, what do we want to return? Well, I suppose what do we want to be building up? We want to, each time we call this, find the differences, create a new range, pass that new range to this function. So we're going to find diff, create, okay, we'll say create diff range, create diff, and then pass to rec. And then when we get whatever we get back, if it's a if it's the terminal condition, then what we need to do is we need to I don't know, I'm struggling to. It's like conceptually straightforward, but like algorithmically a little tricky to kind of decipher what we need to do. I suppose what we're doing is we're just going until we hit a place where all of them are zeros. Then we backtrack, adding a new element to the end based on the differences of the previous one. So for instance, let's look at a more complicated example being like this one, right? We go all the way down to the end, we get 0. We add the new element of the 2. We take that element, that last element, we add it to that last element of the previous list. We take that new last element, add it to the previous list there. Take that new last element. Okay. Alright, alright. So let's say if we're returning back a at the end, let's say this returns a 0, for instance, okay. So if the input is returning back 0, then we need to start collapsing, right? Collapse if rec goes 0. Otherwise, if rec passes back a no, okay. Here's what we do, right? We're going to take the input at each point. We're going to find the differences between them. So we're going to say differences is equal to input dot map Does Crystal have an offset? Sometimes you can map with an offset. Let's see. Let's do array.map. There's map with index with an offset, but that only offsets the index, not the number to start from. Okay, well we can't necessarily remove an element. Let's see. I guess we just use a for loop. Actually, there's no such thing as a for loop in Crystal. What do I want to do here? I suppose we could do a reduce. A reduce is probably better. Let's do a reduce. Because reduce will kind of start with 2 consecutive elements, which is kind of what we want to do here. So we're going to do a reduce, and we're going to reduce it into an array of int32s. And then it's going to essentially just take the accumulator, which I'm going to call diff for now, and the new element. And we want to push into the array. Interesting. So I kind of want a mixture of the two reduced behaviors. If you don't pass an initial argument, it starts with the first two. But if you do, it starts with that element in the next one. And the first one in the, sorry, it starts with the thing that you passed it and the first element in the array. Hmm. Okay. Well, if there is no first element in the array, I can't just push the first element though. Okay. All right. We're just going to say, we're going to create our own little function that calculates the differences of an array. Def, and let's see if there's a better name. What do they call it? Difference. It's just difference. Differences of an array. And we're going to say, oh, you know what? This would be a good opportunity to do some object-oriented stuff. We could say that this is an array, but it also has this extra method called difference on it. So I kind of want to give that a try. I don't know. Maybe I'll refactor that later. I just want to continue on with this for now. So we're going to do a while loop because that's what we got to use. There's no for loop in Crystal, right? Unless I'm making that up. This is a problem with me. For loop support. Yeah. For is redundant to internal iterators, iterator, etc. has since long discouraged in the Ruby community due to its redundancy and unexpected scoping behavior. In fact, it calls each underneath in Ruby and is slightly lower in recent versions than using each directly. Oh, okay. That's how you do a for loop. Right. I forgot about that. So you just do 1, 2, or I guess if we want to start, yeah, we start at 1, right? Because 0 would be the initial offset. To array dot size dot each do, and then each one will be the number. We'll create a new array here. Say differences equals an empty array of int 32. And then we say differences dot push num, array num minus array num minus 1. And then we just return back differences at that point. Okay. Let's just test this out, see if this works. We want to see the differences of, let's take an example from here. 1, 3, 6, 10, 15, 21. 1, 3, 6, 10, 15, 21. Whoa. Wow, that's taking a while to run. Index out of bounds. Okay, that's not good. Do you want to go to erase size -1? There we go. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Excellent. So now we have something that gives us our differences. Then we want to say if the differences are all 0, so then we say differences dot map, they're all 0. Then we want to take our input and push to it the last element I think I can do a -1, right? Take the last element and add to it oh, I guess it's going to be itself, right? Just add to it the last element because it's going to be the same as adding 0. So that's a base case. In any other case, we want to take the differences and take the last element of whatever we got back. Okay, yeah, that's right. So we want to do input dot push rec of input, a rec of differences, take the last element of that, and add it to the last element of input, right? Input -1. I think that's right. Let's see what that does. Let's say puts rec of, we'll do the same one that we did before. So we'll do this next one. Did you mean input? Inputs. Where did I put inputs? Right there. Okay. difference. Yep, I did mean differences. Lots of spelling mistakes. It's kind of cool that Crystal has pretty good error messages, though, for the most part. Okay, so this is doing 68 as the next number. Is that what we wanted? It sure is. Haha, very cool. All right, so that took a little while to figure out. I'm going to definitely find some better names for that. But part one is now pretty close to being done here. All we have to do is loop over each one of them. So we just say input or dataset. Dataset.map and dataset.map, and then we're going to call history rec history, and then we're just going to say dot sum, and then we're going to puts part one. Oh, okay, that didn't give me the sum. Why did it not give me the sum there? Why is it spitting out all this stuff here? Oh, okay. It's because the history there is currently it's actually spinning out the entire array. So grab that and then grab the last element from it. Okay, that's supposedly my answer. Let's see if that worked. That's it. Let's see what part two looks like. I got some good ideas of how I want to refactor this though, so probably revisit that in a sec. Of course, it would be nice to have even more history included in your report. Surely it's safe to just extrapolate backwards as well, right? For each history, repeat the process of finding differences until the sequence of differences is entirely zero. But rather than adding a zero to the end and filling in the next values of each previous sequence, you should instead add a zero to the beginning of your sequence of zeros, then fill in the first values. Okay. Adding the new values on the left side, sequence from the bottom to top, eventually reveals a new leftmost history value 5. Doing this to the remaining example data above results in previous values of -3 for the first history and 0 for the second history. Adding all three new values together produces 2. Okay. So just to get the answer for now, I'm just going to modify this code, and then I'll revisit, I'll do another stream, and I'll revisit the refactoring to make this a little better. So instead of pushing, I think there's this thing called like shift. Or unshift. Prepend, yep. Okay. So unshift input of 0. It actually doesn't really matter which one we unshift at that point. And in fact, we could really save ourselves an extra iteration by, instead of asking, are these all equal to 0, we can just say, are they all the same? But it's okay. So now we want to take the first element and subtract it from, which one do we have to do? We have to swap this around and say input 0 minus rect difference is 0. And then here we just need to grab the first element. Much smaller number is expected because we're going into the negatives for most of them. All right, so that's it. I'm gonna jump off for now and make another video where I go over a refactor of this. See you later.